First, let me start with the name of the person that we hear extremely often. His name is Sigmund Freud. He was the founder of the psychoanalytic theory. This theory is defined as people not being aware of the most important determinants of their behavior. This concept of an unconscious gives us a way of thinking about behaviors or moods. The idea of this theory is that things happen to children during their childhood it can contribute with how people act as adults. Just so you get a clear understanding of what this theory is, an example would be if a gentleman loses his keys in the morning before he goes to work, a psychoanalytic theorist might say in the back of his mind, he really didn't want to go to work. Another example might be if a woman gets into a car accident when she is a child, and every time she gets in a car, she believes that she is going to get into a crash. The two psychoanalytic theorists that I will be discussing today is Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Sigmund Freud was an Australian neurologist and, like I said earlier, the founder of this theory. He focused on three different parts of your mind. He believed that we experience the type of complex. Carl Jung was a young psychiatrist, but was more of a philosopher psychologist, and his work applied more to literature instead of focusing on real life. Like Freud, Carl Jung proposed a theory that gives a prominent role to the unconscious. But the difference was that Jung, the libido was not primarily sexual, it was more spiritual. Now going back to the Freud, there are three structures of personality. There's the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the most primitive structure, and it contains instinctive drives and also known as your wild desires. That's the part that wants to do something and will do it, not worrying about the consequences, whether it's wrong or right. The ego is the more matured structure of the personality, and the ego resolves conflict, and this is more like common sense. The superego is always concerned about what is actually acceptable. Now, Carl Jung believed in archetypes. He believed that we were all linked in some kind of way because of these archetypes. Now, some examples of these archetypes would be the shadow, persona, anima, and animus. The shadow is considered to be dangerous and evil, and the persona is the way that we behave to look good in the front of others, kind of like a mask. The anima and animus, which refers to a woman and a man, the anima being the feminine side that is in the unconsciousness of every man. For example, if he is emotional, or in the animus is the masculinity that is a part of an unconscious for every woman. So the childhood story that I did was The Three Little Pigs. It was an English fairy tale. The characters in this story is the mama pig, piggy number 1, which is the lazy one, piggy number 2, which is not so lazy, but still lazy, piggy 3, which is not the lazy one, and the big bad wolf. A brief summary of the story is about a mama who can't provide because she's becoming elderly, and as the piggies grow older, she starts telling them to search for their own fortune. Each pig goes on their own to build their own houses, and these houses get put to the test when the big bad wolf tries to eat them for supper. Now, the characters that I felt represented this psychoanalytic theory was the mama pig, and that's because in the beginning of the story, she mentions that she can't provide them with food to eat or shelter because she is aging. I feel like she's reacting this way because she is worried that in the future they won't be able to provide for their family. So she sends them to get their own fortune so they learn. The second character I feel represents this theory is the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf, by him being so mean to the three little pigs, and in this story, it doesn't talk about him having friends or family. So maybe because he is lonely, he feels that, he needs to pick on the little pigs. The archetypes of these characters, the characters that I choose for the archetypes were the big bad wolf and piggy number 3. The big bad wolf, his archetype would be the shadow archetype, which is in comparison to Freud's id. Id is the wild desires, whereas the shadow is the wild part of our personalities. The example that the big bad wolf is that he's not caring about any of the consequences of eating the three little pigs. The second character I used was piggy number 3, and the archetype that described his personality is the child, which is the personality who keeps looking forward, doesn't look back to the negative things This would be compared to the superego according to Freud. The reason why the piggy 3 is like this archetype is because in the story, the big bad wolf keeps telling him to go get him food. Another reason why this archetype describes the piggy 3 is because he is the only one who wants to walk as far for the bricks rather than the two other little piggies who want to do straw and straw. These are the references that I use, and that's my video project.